Lieutenant David Pawson stared through the viewport as the shuttle approached Xanthri Conclave. The massive crystalline structure hung, suspended in space like a fragment of mythological architecture, all gleaming surfaces and impossible angles. 6 years of painstaking diplomacy had finally led to this moment. Humanity's first official ambassador setting foot on a legendary space station. Quite the sight, isn't it? Captain Rivera remarked beside him. Hard to believe they built that thing over 2,000 years ago. Pawson nodded, his throat dry. And we're just now getting invited to the party. Don't sell us short, Lieutenant. Post-galactic war. We're lucky they're talking to us at all. Most species take centuries to gain an audience. The shuttle banked, revealing the true scale of the conclave. Crystalline spires stretched for kilometers, connected by gossamer bridges that seemed impossibly delicate. Ships of countless designs docked along its perimeter, some organic and flowing, others geometric and precise, representing the dozens of civilizations that made up the Xanthri Alliance. Remember, Rivera continued, her voice dropping to a whisper despite the privacy of their cabin. This mission is strictly diplomatic. The Xanthri value tradition above all else. Some factions still believe humans are too unpredictable, too aggressive for full alliance membership. I've memorized the protocols, Captain, Pawson replied, straightening his formal uniform. The weight of responsibility pressed down on his shoulders. 6 billion humans were counting on him not to screw this up. I know you have. That's why you were chosen. She paused. But there's something you should know about Princess Rhaenyra. Pawson raised an eyebrow. The Xanthri royal had featured prominently in his briefings. Heir to the crystalline throne, decorated warrior, and vocal skeptic of human integration. She's traditional, even by Xanthri standards. She leads the conservative faction that believes emerging species like ours threaten the old ways. And she's their greatest warrior. Wonderful, Pawson muttered. So I'll be facing their strongest anti-human advocate. The shuttle slowed as it approached the docking bay, the crystalline walls parting like liquid to admit them. Just remember your training, Rivera said, rising as the craft settled into its berth. And for God's sake, don't make any sudden movements around them. Their perceptual time is different from ours. They see fast motion as aggression. Pawson nodded, mentally reviewing the 1,000 cultural taboos he'd memorized. Don't show the palms of your hands. Never touch a Xanthri's crest. Avoid direct eye contact with those of higher rank. Accept all offered beverages, even if they smell like battery acid. As the airlock cycled, Pawson took a deep breath. The future of humanity's place in the galactic community rested on what happened in the next few days. The door slid open to reveal a reception party of 6 Xanthri. They stood nearly 2 meters tall, their slender bodies covered in iridescent scales that shifted colors with their movements, currently a formal shade of deep purple. Their crests, fin-like structures extending from their skulls, were elaborately decorated with precious metals and gemstones, indicating their high status. At their center stood a figure whose presence commanded attention. Her scales shimmered with a royal blue intensity that almost hurt to look at, and her crest bore markings Pawson recognized as military honors. Princess Rhaenyra carried herself with the unmistakable poise of someone who had never known defeat. Lieutenant David Pawson, announced the Xanthri translator, his voice melodious and precise. We welcome you to the Xanthri Conclave as representative of Earth and its colonies. Pawson bowed exactly 15 degrees, the proper angle for greeting royalty without claiming equal status. The people of Earth are honored by your hospitality, Your Highness. Rhaenyra's multifaceted eyes studied him with unnerving intensity. Unlike her companions, whose expressions were carefully neutral, Rhaenyra made no attempt to hide her skepticism. So small, she remarked in flawless English, her voice like crystal chimes. Are all humans so fragile-looking? Captain Rivera tensed beside him, but Pawson maintained his diplomatic smile. We come in many shapes and sizes, Your Highness. What we lack in physical presence, we hope to compensate for in other qualities. Rhaenyra's crest fluttered, the Xanthary equivalent of a dismissive sniff. We shall see. The Grand Chamber awaits. Your formal presentation to the conclave begins in one planetary rotation. As the delegation turned to lead them deeper into the station, Pawson caught Rhaenyra casting one final appraising glance over her shoulder. In that moment, he realized this wasn't just skepticism, it was calculation. The quarters assigned to the human delegation were luxurious by any standard, with walls that seemed to capture and amplify starlight. Yet Pawson couldn't shake the feeling they were designed to intimidate rather than comfort. Everything scaled slightly too large, too alien. The reception could have gone worse, Rivera remarked as they settled in. At least no one challenged you to ritual combat. Pawson laughed nervously. Yet, a soft chime announced a visitor. The door dissolved to reveal a small Xanthary whose scales shimmered in gentle teal waves. A calming color, Pawson recalled from his briefings. I am Kira, she announced with a bow considerably deeper than protocol required. I have been assigned as your cultural attaché during your stay. Pawson returned the bow. We're grateful for your assistance. Kira's eyes darted nervously to Captain Rivera, then back to Pawson. If I might speak privately with the lieutenant, there are certain nuances of tomorrow's ceremony that require additional explanation. Once alone, Kira's demeanor changed. Her scales darkened to a more serious hue. Lieutenant, I must warn you. There are aspects of tomorrow's ceremony that were deliberately omitted from your briefings. I suspected as much, Pawson replied, gesturing for her to continue. The traditionalist faction, led by Princess Rhaenyra and Commander Zothrak, has altered the reception protocol. They've invoked ancient rites to include a Kravith challenge. Pawson frowned. I'm not familiar with that term. It is an ancient ritual, a test of worthiness through combat. Kira's scales pulsed with agitation. It hasn't been used for an ambassadorial reception in over 5 centuries. Combat? You're saying they want me to fight? Not just anyone. The challenger will be Princess Rhaenyra herself. Pawson fell silent, processing the implications. This is a deliberate insult, isn't it? Sending their strongest warrior against me. Yes and no, Kira replied. It is a political move, certainly, but it's also traditional. In the ancient days, when new species sought alliance, they would send their warriors, not diplomats. Her eyes met his directly, a breach of etiquette that emphasized her sincerity. If you refuse, it will confirm their belief that humans are too weak for true alliance. And if I accept and lose, you will bring great honor to humanity, even in defeat, provided you fight with dignity. And if I win? Pawson asked, though he already suspected the answer. Kira's scales flashed a color he couldn't interpret. No off-worlder has ever defeated Princess Rhaenyra in combat. Pawson sighed. Of course not. There's one more thing you should know, Kira added, her voice dropping lower. Not all Xantharies support the traditionalists. Many of us, the progressives, believe alliance with humanity is essential for our future. We have studied your species carefully. Your adaptability, your creativity. She hesitated. Your capacity for compassion. These are qualities our civilization needs. Then why don't you stop this challenge? Because change must come through tradition, not despite it. Kira moved toward the door. Rest well, Lieutenant. Tomorrow, you fight not just for yourself, but for the future of 2 civilizations. As she left, Pawson collapsed onto the oversized bed, staring at the ceiling where distant stars seemed to swirl in patterns both beautiful and alien. His mission had just transformed from diplomacy to survival, and he had less than 24 hours to prepare. The Grand Chamber of the Xanthary Conclave defied human architectural understanding. Its massive dome seemed to simultaneously exist and not exist. Solid crystal and open space merged in impossible harmony. Thousands of Xanthary representatives filled the tiered seating, their scales creating a living mosaic of color that shifted with collective mood. Currently, a tense amber gold. Pawson stood on the central platform, painfully aware of the silence that had fallen when Princess Rhaenyra had formally issued her challenge. Captain Rivera's face had gone pale with shock, while the other human diplomats looked ready, to evacuate immediately. As is tradition, Rhaenyra declared, her voice carrying effortlessly through the chamber, I invoke the ancient right of Kravith, the testing of worthy adversaries. Before the conclave admits new blood to our alliance, that blood must prove its value. The traditional factions' scales brightened with approval, while others dimmed in apparent disagreement. High Elder Vaneth, leader of the Conclave Council, turned his ancient eyes toward Pawson. Lieutenant, you are under no obligation to accept this challenge. However, I must inform you that declining would influence our deliberations regarding Earth's petition. In other words, Pawson thought grimly, refuse and humanity's application dies here. He stepped forward, maintaining the precise movements he'd practiced to avoid triggering the Xanthari's predatory instincts. The people of Earth respect tradition, he announced, choosing his words carefully. I accept Princess Rhaenyra's challenge with gratitude for the opportunity to demonstrate humanity's qualities. A murmur rippled through the assembly. Surprise, perhaps even respect. Rhaenyra's multifaceted eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication that his acceptance had caught her off guard. The Kravith will commence at the rising of the central star, declared Elder Vaneth. May honor guide your blades. As the assembly dissolved into excited conversation, Captain Rivera grabbed Pawson's arm. What the hell are you doing? She hissed. You can't fight her. She's been trained in combat for over a century. Did I have a choice? Pawson replied quietly. Besides, the parameters of the challenge haven't been specified. Maybe it's chess. This isn't a joke, Lieutenant. The Xanthari take this deadly seriously. So do I. Pawson watched as Rhaenyra departed, surrounded by her supporters. But there's something else going on here. She could have delegated this challenge to any warrior, but she's doing it herself. Why? Rivera shook her head. Whatever her reasons, you need to prepare. I'll request a postponement. Cite diplomatic protocols. No, Pawson interrupted. That would only confirm their suspicions about us. I need to learn everything I can about Kravith combat before tomorrow. I may be able to help with that, came a soft voice behind them. Kira approached, her scales a subdued violet, concern Pawson had learned. Follow me. There is little time. The training chamber Kira led them to was deep within the station, away from the main corridors. Its walls displayed scenes of Xanthari combat throughout the ages, stylized depictions of warriors wielding crystalline weapons against a variety of opponents. Kravith is not about killing, Kira explained as she activated a simulation program. It is about testing worthiness. A worthy opponent shows 4 virtues: strength, strategy, endurance, and honor. A holographic Xanthari warrior appeared, demonstrating fighting stances that looked simultaneously familiar and alien to Pawson's military-trained eye. You will each be armed with a Kravith blade, Kira continued, producing a short crystal sword that hummed faintly when activated. The blade is ceremonial. It can cut, but is designed to wound, not kill. That's reassuring, Pawson muttered, taking the weapon. It was heavier than it looked, with perfect balance. The challenge ends when one combatant scores 3 touches or concedes. However, Kira hesitated. Let me guess. No one ever concedes. Pawson finished for her. It would be unprecedented, Kira agreed, particularly for Princess Rhaenyra. For the next several hours, Pawson trained against the holographic opponent, learning the basic forms of Xanthari combat. The fighting style emphasized fluid movement and precision rather than brute force, which gave him a slight hope. As a human, he couldn't match Rhaenyra's strength or speed, but he might compensate with unpredictability. You learn quickly, Kira observed as Pawson successfully parried a complex attack sequence. Most species take days to grasp the fundamentals. Humans are adaptable, Pawson replied, breathing heavily. It's our defining trait. We've had to be, coming from a planet with such diverse challenges. That adaptability is precisely what frightens the traditionalists, Kira said, deactivating the simulation. Species that adapt quickly can also change quickly, culturally, technologically, philosophically. The Xanthari have maintained stability for millennia by evolving very, very slowly. So we're threatening because we move too fast. Precisely. And to some, like Commander Zothrak, that represents an existential threat. He believes humans will disrupt the balance, perhaps even eventually dominate the Alliance. Pawson thought about Earth's own history, how often faster-changing societies had indeed overwhelmed more traditional ones. Zothrak's fears weren't entirely unfounded. And Rhaenyra? What does she believe? Kira's scales shifted to a contemplative blue. Princess Rhaenyra is complex. She leads the traditionalists, yes, but she is a student of history. She understands that stagnation can be as dangerous as unchecked change. Then why challenge me? Why oppose her membership? I believe she wants to understand humanity directly. Words and data can be misleading. Combat reveals truth. A chime signaled that their training time was ending. As they prepared to leave, Pawson asked the question that had been bothering him. Kira, be honest, do I have any chance against her tomorrow? Kira's scales flickered through several colors before settling on a straightforward gray. By conventional metrics, no. Princess Rhaenyra has never been defeated. But humans? She tilted her head curiously. Humans have a history of achieving the impossible. Perhaps that is what she wishes to see. That night, Pawson could not sleep. He paced his quarters, replaying the training sequences in his mind. On a rational level, he knew his chances were minimal, but humanity's future depended on what happened in that arena tomorrow. He couldn't afford to fail. A soft chime interrupted his thoughts. The door dissolved to reveal Rhaenyra herself, alone and without ceremony. Her scales were subdued to a midnight blue that absorbed light rather than reflecting it. Lieutenant, she said simply. May I enter? Pawson stepped aside, concealing his surprise. Your Highness, this is unexpected. Rhaenyra glided into the room, examining the human accommodations with analytical precision. I thought it appropriate to speak with you before tomorrow's challenge. To offer me a chance to withdraw? Pawson asked, keeping his tone light. No, her multifaceted eyes fixed on him. To understand why you accepted. Did you expect me to refuse? Previous ambassadorial candidates from other species often have. She moved to the viewport, gazing at the stars. They cite diplomatic immunity, protocol violations, physical disadvantages. They prioritize survival over honor. Perhaps they were being practical. Perhaps. She turned back to him. But practicality without principle is merely convenience. It reveals nothing about the true nature of species. Pawson studied her, seeing beyond the formal exterior for the first time. You're testing us. This isn't about tradition at all. You want to see how humans respond under pressure. A flicker of color rippled across her scales. Surprise, maybe even appreciation. You are perceptive, Lieutenant Pawson. Yes, I seek to understand what humans truly value. Your species is young, aggressive, adaptable, qualities that have destroyed alliances before. We're also cooperative, innovative, and compassionate, Pawson countered. We've overcome our own divisions to reach the stars. Words, Rhaenyra dismissed with a gesture. Tomorrow, I will see the truth of humanity through combat. And what truth do you hope to find? Rhaenyra paused at the doorway. That is the question, isn't it? Sleep well, Lieutenant. Tomorrow will be illuminating. The combat arena was a perfect circle of polished crystal set within the heart of the conclave. Its transparent floor revealed the void of space below, creating the illusion that the combatants would battle suspended among the stars themselves. The symbolism wasn't lost on Pawson. One misstep here could indeed cast humanity into the abyss of isolation for generations to come. The assembled dignitaries filled the surrounding tiers, scales shimmering in anticipation. Captain Rivera and the human delegation sat isolated in their section, faces tight with concern. Across the chamber, Commander Zothrak watched with predatory intensity, his military-adorned crest marking him clearly as Rhaenyra's faction leader. High Elder Vaneth raised his ancient hands, silencing the murmurs. We gather to witness Kraveth, the testing of worthiness through honorable combat. Princess Rhaenyra of the Crystalline Throne has challenged Lieutenant David Pawson of Earth. The terms are traditional, 3 touches to determine victory. Attendants presented ceremonial robes to both combatants. Pawson donned a lightweight garment that left his arms free. Rhaenyra's scales gleamed with martial intensity as she took her position opposite him. "Begin," commanded Elder Vaneth, striking a crystalline gong that resonated through the chamber. Rhaenyra moved instantly, faster than Pawson had anticipated despite Kira's warnings. Her blade traced a brilliant arc through the air as she tested his defenses. Pawson parried desperately, giving ground, feeling the alien weapon vibrate in his hands with each impact. The Xanthari princess fought with disciplined precision, each movement flowing into the next like water. Pawson's human instincts, more accustomed to chaotic battlefields than ritualized combat, struggled to anticipate her patterns. Within moments, she had him on the defensive, backing toward the edge of the arena. A gasp rose from the human delegation as her blade slipped past his guard, scoring a shallow cut on his shoulder. "First touch to Princess Rhaenyra," announced Elder Vaneth. Pawson resumed his stance, ignoring the sting. As they circled each other, he noticed something. Rhaenyra was fighting according to traditional forms, exactly as he'd trained against. Her movements, while devastatingly effective, were predictable to someone who knew the patterns. When she attacked again, Pawson was ready. Instead of parrying directly, he sidestepped in a manner no Xanthari would consider, efficient but inelegant. The unexpected movement created an opening, and Pawson lunged, his blade grazing Rhaenyra's side. Absolute silence fell over the arena. Then, murmurs of astonishment rippled through the crowd. "First touch to Lieutenant Pawson," Elder Vaneth declared, unable to keep surprise. From his voice, Rhaenyra's eyes narrowed, her scales flickering with renewed intensity. When she attacked again, gone was the textbook precision. She fought with creative adaptations of traditional forms, mixing techniques in ways Pawson couldn't predict. Her blade became a blur of crystal light. Pain flared across Pawson's cheek as she scored her second touch, drawing blood. The cut was superficial but strategic, partially impairing his vision as blood threatened to drip into his eye. "Second touch to Princess Rhaenyra," announced Elder Vaneth. Pawson wiped the blood from his face, aware that one more touch would end the match, and possibly humanity's hopes for alliance. He had to do something unexpected, something no Xanthari would anticipate. As they circled each other for the final exchange, Pawson noticed Rhaenyra's gaze repeatedly flicking to the blood on his hand. There was something in her expression, not disgust, but something closer to fascination, confusion. An idea formed, desperate, possibly foolish, but human in its adaptability. When Rhaenyra attacked again, Pawson parried, and then did something no Xanthari warrior would ever consider. He deliberately drew his hand across his bleeding face and flicked the blood directly at Rhaenyra's eyes, not as an attack, but as a distraction. What happened next stunned everyone in the arena. Princess Rhaenyra, undefeated champion of the Xanthari, froze completely at the sight of human blood spattering before her. Her scales lost all color, fading to a shocked white. Then, without warning, she collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Chaos erupted in the chamber. Medical attendants rushed forward. Zothrak rose to his feet, scales flaring crimson with rage. "Treachery," he bellowed. "The human has used biological weapons." Pawson stood frozen in shock, his weapon lowered. I didn't. It's just blood." But the Xanthari were reacting with collective horror, scales pulsing in distress patterns. Some were backing away from the arena as though from contamination. Only Elder Vaneth maintained his composure, raising his hands for silence. "Take the princess to medical immediately," he commanded, then turned to Pawson. "Lieutenant, you will come with me." Now, as guards escorted him from the arena, Pawson caught a glimpse of Captain Rivera's face, a mixture of horror and confusion that perfectly mirrored his own feelings. Whatever he'd stumbled into, he suspected Earth's diplomatic mission had just imploded spectacularly. The medical chamber hummed with unfamiliar technology as doctors attended to the still unconscious Rhaenyra. Through translucent barriers, Pawson watched anxiously, flanked by stern Xanthari guards and Elder Vaneth. "I don't understand," Pawson said for perhaps the fifth time. "It was just a small amount of blood. Is she allergic to humans? Is it toxic somehow?" Elder Vaneth's ancient eyes studied him with new intensity. "You truly don't know, do you?" "Know what?" "My briefings contain nothing about Xanthari reactions to human blood, because we kept it from your scientists." The elder's scales shifted to a solemn gray. "Lieutenant, what you must understand is that Xanthari physiology is fundamentally different from yours. Our evolutionary path never exposed our blood to open air. It remains entirely contained within a closed circulatory system throughout our lives." Pawson frowned. "But surely you've seen other species bleed before." "Yes, but human blood is—" The elder seemed to search for words. "Uniquely vibrant. The particular shade of red triggers a neurological response in Xanthari, something akin to what you might call phobia, but more profound. It disrupts our autonomic nervous system." "She fainted because my blood is red?" Pawson asked incredulously. "It is more complex than that. The psychological shock, combined with certain properties of your hemoglobin, created a perfect neural disruption." The elder's scales rippled with reluctant admiration. "You inadvertently discovered our most carefully guarded vulnerability." Pawson absorbed this, the implications dawning on him. "That's why some of you don't want humans in the Alliance. You're afraid of our blood. Not precisely afraid, but consider the strategic disadvantage. In any conflict, humans would have an inherent psychological weapon against us simply by being wounded." Before Pawson could respond, a commotion from the medical area drew their attention. Rhaenyra was awake, pushing away her attendants despite their protests. Her scales cycled through colors rapidly: confusion, anger, determination. When she saw Pawson, she went completely still. "The human. Bring him here." The guards looked to Elder Vaneth, who nodded permission. Pawson approached cautiously, stopping at what he hoped was a respectful distance. Rhaenyra's multifaceted eyes fixed on him with disturbing intensity. "You used your blood against me. I didn't know it would affect you that way," Pawson replied. "Honestly, where I come from, it's just blood. Everyone bleeds. Not like you do." Her voice was steady, but Pawson could see her scales flickering with suppressed reaction. "Never like you do." Elder Vaneth stepped forward. "Princess, you must rest. The neural shock." "I am fine." She dismissed his concern with a gesture. "Leave us. I would speak with the human alone." The medical staff and guards withdrew reluctantly, leaving Pawson facing Rhaenyra across the recovery chamber. For a long moment, she simply studied him, as though seeing him truly for the first time. "Do you know why I challenge you to Kravith, Lieutenant Pawson?" "You wanted to test humanity's worthiness for the Alliance," he answered cautiously. "No, I wanted to prove your unworthiness." Her scales shifted to a color he hadn't seen before, something between shame and revelation. "I believe humans too dangerous, too unpredictable to join our carefully balanced alliance. And now I understand that we need precisely those qualities." She rose from the medical platform, moving closer despite a visible effort to control her instinctive aversion. "There is something you should know. The real reason the traditionalists fear human integration." Pawson waited, sensing a pivotal moment. 3 cycles ago, our long-range patrols encountered a new species at the outer rim, the Krill. Aggressive, expansionist, technologically advanced. Her voice hardened. "And they use weaponized hemocytes, blood-based biological weapons, as their primary offensive capability." Understanding dawned. "And your people have no natural defense against such weapons." "Exactly. The first Xanthari colony they attacked was lost within days. Our warriors were incapacitated by mere exposure to their blood-based agents." Her scales darkened with remembered pain. "The Conclave has been in secret crisis ever since. Some believe isolation is our only safety. Others think alliance with species who might be immune could save you," Pawson finished. "Species like humans. Yes. Rhaenyra's eyes held his steadily now, despite her obvious discomfort. Your accidental demonstration today proved what our progressive scientists have theorized. Humans possess natural resilience to the very weapons that most threaten us. Pawson considered the implications. So, my diplomatic mission isn't just about expanding the alliance. It's about survival, yours and potentially ours. Indeed. But Commander Zothrak and his faction believe accepting human help would make us dependent, vulnerable to a different kind of conquest. She moved to the viewport, gazing at the stars. They would rather face extinction with pride intact than survive through adaptation. And you? Pawson asked quietly. What do you believe now? Rhaenyra turned back to him, her scales settling into a determined blue. I believe I must overcome my instinctive reaction to your blood, Lieutenant, and I would ask your help in doing so. The next 12 hours passed in a blur of secret meetings and hushed explanations. Kira had smuggled Captain Rivera into a secure chamber where Rhaenyra, Pawson, and a select group of progressive leaders gathered. This is unprecedented, Rivera said after hearing the full situation. You're asking for an immediate military alliance against these krill, bypassing years of normal diplomatic procedure. Necessity accelerates progress, replied Rhaenyra. Her scales still flickered uncomfortably whenever she looked directly at Pawson, but she maintained her composure. The krill advance will not wait for traditional protocols. What exactly are you proposing? Pawson asked. Elder Vaneth, who had revealed himself as a secret progressive sympathizer, activated a holographic display. We propose a joint training initiative. Xanthri warriors must learn to overcome their blood aversion through controlled exposure. Human volunteers would train alongside them, developing integrated combat tactics effective against krill hemocyte weapons. And politically, Rivera Prest. The traditionalists won't simply accept this. No, Rhaenyra acknowledged, which is why I must publicly champion your cause. As royal heir and military commander, my endorsement carries significant weight. At great personal risk, Kira added softly. Zothrak will view this as betrayal. Rhaenyra's scales darkened. He already does. My reaction in the arena has been framed as evidence that I've been contaminated by human influence. He is calling for my removal from succession. Then why help us? Pawson asked. Because principles without practicality lead to extinction, she replied, echoing their earlier conversation. The Xanthri must adapt or perish. I choose adaptation. As dawn approached, they finalized their plan. Rhaenyra would formally withdraw her opposition to human membership at the reconvened conclave session. In exchange, Earth would commit to immediate military cooperation against the krill threat. Just before they departed, Rhaenyra approached Pawson privately. There is one more thing, she said, her voice lower than usual. My public conversion will be more convincing if I demonstrate mastery over my aversion to human blood. I must ask something difficult of you. Pawson nodded. You want me to help you overcome your reaction? Yes. Beginning now, she extended her hand, a gesture she must have learned from human cultural briefings. Pawson understood the profound significance of the request. Physical contact between different species was rare enough in the alliance. For Xanthri Royal to initiate, it was unprecedented. Slowly, he reached out and took her hand. Her scales were surprisingly warm, almost vibrating with nervous energy. He could see her fighting against instinct, her colors fluctuating wildly before stabilizing into a determined blue. Good, she whispered. Now the true test. From a concealed pocket, she produced a small crystal vial and handed it to him. Your medical staff provided this. A small sample of your blood. Pawson understood. Are you sure? No, she admitted. But necessity demands certainty, not comfort. Carefully, Pawson unsealed the vial. Rhaenyra's scales immediately blanched, but she held her ground, forcing herself to look directly at the red liquid. I will not. Her voice faltered. I will not be governed by instinct. For 10 long seconds, she stared at the blood, her entire body rigid with effort. Then, deliberately, she reached out and touched the vial with one slender finger. "Adaptation," she whispered, the words sounding like both a promise and a prayer. The reconvened conclave session crackled with tension. News of Rhaenyra's collapse had spread throughout the station, along with rumors of human biological warfare. Commander Zothrak sat with his faction, scales glowing angry crimson. When Rhaenyra entered alongside Pawson, a shocked murmur rippled through the assembly. She moved with deliberate grace to the central platform, her head held high. "Esteemed members of the conclave," she began, her voice clear and strong. "I stand before you transformed, not by alien contamination as some would claim, but by wisdom hard-won." Her scales shifted to formal presentation mode, a brilliant azure that commanded attention. The Kravith challenge revealed truth, as tradition demands, but not the truth I sought. She gestured to Pawson. "I expected to find weakness in humanity. Instead, I discovered the very strength our civilization requires in the face of the Krill threat." Zothrak surged to his feet. "This is absurd. The human used a biological agent against you. Proof of their treachery." "He used no weapon but truth," Rhaenyra countered. "And that truth is simple. The Xanthari can no longer afford the luxury of unchanged tradition. The Krill care nothing for our ancient ways. They care only for conquest." She moved to face Zothrak directly. "You know this, Commander. Your own reports detail 3 more colony losses while we debate in this chamber." For the first time, uncertainty flickered across Zothrak's scales. The solutions to Xanthari problems must be Xanthari in origin. Depending on outsiders makes us vulnerable in different ways. "Then test them yourself," Rhaenyra challenged. "I invoke your right to Kravith against Lieutenant Pawson." Absolute silence fell across the chamber. Elder Vaneth leaned forward, scales rippling with surprise. "Princess, this is highly irregular. 2 challenges in succession is permitted under ancient law when questions of succession and alliance coincide," Rhaenyra finished firmly. "Commander Zothrak questions my judgment and fitness to lead. Let him test both through the human champion." All eyes turned to Zothrak, who found himself trapped by tradition. To refuse would undermine his entire position. "I accept," he declared finally. "And when I defeat this human, both your judgment and this misguided alliance will be rejected." The second Kravith began only hours later. Pawson had barely recovered from the first match, but he understood the stakes all too well. This wasn't just about diplomacy anymore. It was about the survival of both civilizations. Zothrak was a different fighter than Rhaenyra, less fluid, more aggressive. His military crest gleamed with honors as he took his position opposite Pawson. "I've studied your previous match," the commander said coldly. "Your tricks won't work twice." "I'm counting on it," Pawson replied, settling into his stance. When Elder Vaneth signaled to start, Zothrak attacked with brutal efficiency. His blade slashed through the air with killing intent, barely disguised by ceremonial restraint. Pawson parried desperately, giving ground. But this time he had a strategy. During their planning session, Rhaenyra had revealed Zothrak's weakness. A traditional soldier, he fought with textbook precision but lacked creative adaptation. Pawson deliberately fought defensively, letting Zothrak drive him back while studying the commander's patterns. Every Xanthari combat form had a balanced counterform, perfect in theory but predictable in application. Zothrak scored the first touch easily, his blade opening a shallow cut on Pawson's arm. The commander's scales flashed triumphantly as Elder Vaneth acknowledged the point. But Pawson had been watching, learning. As they reset, he shifted his stance subtly, adopting an imperfect, human variation of Xanthari forms. When Zothrak attacked again, Pawson was ready. He countered with movements that appeared clumsy but created unpredictable angles. The commander's blade met empty air as Pawson ducked beneath his guard and scored a touch. "First touch to Lieutenant Pawson," announced Elder Vaneth. Zothrak's scales darkened with anger. His next attack came faster, more aggressive, and less controlled. Pawson continued his strategy, fighting with deliberate imperfection that confused the commander's traditional expectations. The match stretched longer than anyone anticipated. Both combatants scored a second touch, bringing them to match point. Zothrak was visibly frustrated, his scales pulsing with barely contained rage. "You dishonor the Kravith with your unorthodox methods," he hissed during a momentary blade lock. "I honor it by fighting to win," Pawson replied calmly. "Adaptation doesn't mean abandoning tradition. It means evolution." Something in those words seemed to enrage Zothrak further. His next attack abandoned all pretense of ceremony, becoming a brutal offensive designed to overwhelm through sheer force. But in his anger, he overextended. Pawson sidestepped the wild swing and, with precise control, scored the final touch across Zothrak's shoulder. "Final touch to Lieutenant Pawson," Elder Vaneth declared. "The Kravith is concluded." Stunned silence fell across the chamber. Zothrak stood frozen in disbelief, his scales cycling through shock, rage, and finally, a dull gray of defeat. Rhaenyra stepped onto the platform, her gaze moving between Pawson and Zothrak. "The ancient laws are clear," she announced. "Through Kravith, truth is revealed. Lieutenant Pawson has demonstrated the wisdom of adaptation within the framework of tradition, precisely the balance our civilization requires." She turned to address the full conclave. "I formally endorse humanity's petition for alliance membership, with specific provisions for immediate military cooperation against the Krill threat." Elder Vaneth rose slowly, his ancient eyes surveying the assembly. "The matter will be put to vote, as tradition demands." The voting process took less than an hour, remarkably swift by Xanthri standards. When the results were announced, humanity had been accepted into the alliance by a narrow but decisive margin. As the formal ceremony concluded, Pawson found himself surrounded by Xanthri officials eager to discuss integration protocols and defense strategies. The atmosphere had transformed from suspicious formality to urgent cooperation. Captain Rivera caught his eye across the chamber, giving him a subtle nod of approval. Against all odds, the mission had succeeded, though in a way no one could have predicted. Later that evening, as the diplomatic teams worked through implementation details, Pawson escaped to a quiet observation deck. The vast expanse of stars stretched before him, now filled with new meaning and responsibility. "Lieutenant," Rhaenyra's voice came softly from behind him. Or should I say Ambassador now? He turned to find her standing in the doorway, her scales a calm, reflective blue. "I think we're beyond titles at this point, don't you?" She moved to join him at the viewport. Indeed, after sharing blood challenges, certain formalities seem insufficient. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the stars. "Commander Zothrak has requested reassignment to the outer colonies," Rhaenyra said finally. "He wishes to prove his loyalty through direct combat with the Krill. Will he succeed? Perhaps. His traditional approach has value against conventional enemies. But against the Krill, she left the thought unfinished. Adaptation requires different champions." Pawson understood what she wasn't saying. "You want me to help train your warriors? Not just you. We need a full human contingent, medical personnel, combat specialists, scientists." The Krill advance grows more aggressive each cycle. Her scales flickered with determination. "I will lead the integration personally." That's a significant commitment from the heir to the throne. The future of the throne depends on the survival of our people. She turned to face him directly. "And I have my own adaptation to complete." From a concealed pocket, she produced the vial of his blood, still unsealed. With deliberate movement, she opened it, her scales blanching but quickly stabilizing. "I have been practicing," she explained, her voice steady. "Despite obvious effort, each day, the reaction diminishes slightly." "That's impressive," Pawson said, genuinely moved by her determination. "Necessary," she corrected, resealing the vial. "The first joint Xanthri human fleet departs in 15 cycles. I intend to command it, alongside you, if you accept the assignment." Pawson blinked in surprise. "Me? I'm a diplomatic officer. not a fleet commander. You are both warrior and diplomat, precisely what this mission requires. Her scales shifted to a color he hadn't seen before, something almost warm. Besides, you've beaten me in combat. That makes you uniquely qualified by our standards. Technically, you fainted. I didn't actually win, Pawson pointed out with a smile. A tactical detail I've omitted from official records, she replied, her voice containing what might have been humor. My reputation remains mostly intact. Together they looked out at the stars again, the silence between them comfortable now. We face an uncertain future, Rhaenyra said finally. Two civilizations, vastly different, suddenly dependent on each other for survival. That's how the best alliances form, Pawson replied. Not through perfect alignment, but through complementary strengths. Perhaps. Her scales shifted thoughtfully. Your human philosophers have a concept we've been studying, synthesis. The creation of something new from the combination of different elements. You think that's what's happening here? A synthesis of cultures. I believe it is inevitable, she said, her multifaceted eyes reflecting starlight. The Krill forced this moment, but perhaps it was always our destiny. Stagnation ends, adaptation begins. As the first notification chimes of the new Alliance protocols sounded throughout the station, Rhaenyra's scales shifted to a color Pawson had never seen before, a shimmering violet with undertones of gold. What does that color mean? He asked, curious. It has no translation in your language, she replied. The closest approximation would be anticipation of beneficial change. Hope, Pawson suggested. We call that hope. Rhaenyra considered this, then nodded. Yes, hope seems appropriate. She gestured toward the stars. This is not an ending, Lieutenant Pawson. No, he agreed, feeling the weight of two civilizations' futures settling on his shoulders and finding it lighter than expected when shared. It's just the beginning.